about 20 very distinguished current, former senior figures from across the region and beyond, including Israelis, Palestinians, representatives of key Arab states, and voices from international organizations and civil society, half of them women, and I would like to underline that. Actually, stakeholders who would not necessarily find themselves around the same table. The group's discussions focused primarily on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but also on developments in Syria and Lebanon. Now, today there is significant momentum in the Middle East. Despite the many challenges, and we'll discuss that, the current moment offers a rare opportunity for positive change. And before I introduce our highly distinguished panel, let me whet your appetite a bit more to read the publication. We also reflect some of the key findings from an exclusive Arab Barometer survey that was done last year to lend a voice to the people, actually. And just to give you one example, it was very interesting to see that a majority of Israelis and an even larger majority of Palestinians favor a two-state outcome, whether in the form of the traditional two states for two peoples or a confederation. I think it's important to listen to the people, and I think this is a very encouraging sign. But now let me introduce you to our very distinguished panel. To my right, His Highness Prince Faisal, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Next to him, His Excellency Assad Hassan al-Shaibani, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates from the Syrian Arab Republic. Next to him, His Excellency Espen Barth Eide, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Norway. And to his right, Her Excellency Sigrid Kaag, member of the Gaza Executive Board and also co-chair of the Board of Directors from the UN foundations. And also, let me explain, I will do two rounds, the first focusing on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the next one on Syria, and then we will open up for questions to all of you. If I may start with you, Prince Faisal. The Saudi-French proposal marked a very important milestone, not only for, in a way, shaping post-war arrangement in Gaza, but also for underlining the credible path finally towards a Palestinian state. So the question is, how are we on this today, and also in light of the Gaza peace plan and Saudi Arabia's membership in the Board of Peace, how do these initiatives interact, and to what extent can the Saudi-French proposal and the Board of Peace complement one another? Over to you.
Thank you very much. I think first I'm going to just pick up on something you said about public opinion, because I think that's incredibly important. And you're pointing out that the majority of Israelis and the majority of Palestinians support a two-state solution. I think that is something that should give us heart, because that means that the people of Israel and the people of Palestine understand that in order for both of them to have a better future, they need to find a way to live together and live side by side in peace and in harmony. And that's the driving ethos that we are building all of what we are doing, all of what we're trying to do in addressing the conflict. So whether it was the Two-State Solution Conference and the New York Declaration, or whether it's our support for the 20-point plan and the Gaza ceasefire initiative and the Board of Peace, we are driven by that conviction, the conviction that in order for all of us in the region, not just to have peace, but to have a pathway towards a better future, a future of prosperity and of development, we will need peace for the Palestinians and for the Israelis. So I think the commitment that the Board of Peace and the resolution, the 20-point plan, had, first of all, to stop the conflict in Gaza, but also to use that then to build towards the Palestinian people's right to self-determination, is something that we need to build on. And reinforcing this conviction among Palestinians and Israelis that their destiny is to live together side by side in peace, with the rights of the Palestinians respected and delivered, is, I think, what gives us hope for the future. So that's what we're focused on. First, to support the ceasefire in Gaza, to make sure that the situation there stabilizes, that we start the process of rebuilding, and then that we use that as a springboard towards addressing the rights of the Palestinians, towards eventual Palestinian statehood as is deserved and is the only guarantee for all of us in the region to have a long-lasting peace.
I will turn to Norway. Norway has a long-standing commitment to peace in the Middle East, and of course you will always be remembered for your role in the Oslo process. Now with settlement expansions and the recent Israeli decision to allow direct acquisition of land by settlers in the West Bank, can I ask you a blunt question? Is Oslo dead?
So I was about to say yes and no, but I prefer to say no and yes. And the difference is that it's not dead when it comes to what is the final goal, what is the vision. As Prince Faisal very rightly said, there is no real peaceful end to this without the Palestinian state, and that has to encompass both Gaza and the West Bank and relevant part of Jerusalem. There are accommodations for land swaps and so on, but that is still the goal. So that's the no. But I have to be frank with you that it's also a yes, because looking backwards, and somebody from Oslo and who has been involved in this for decades, I also have to say that we did not see that by presupposing that the two parties can voluntarily negotiate until they agreed, actually also installed a veto on that party that was least interested in progress. And most of the time that was Israel, particularly during the many rounds of Netanyahu governments. So by simply not turning up to the meeting, or by simply not allowing progress, there was no progress, so that meant there was a veto. So we broke with that part as Norway, and that was quite significant. It was very much after close consultation with our friends in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and several other good, wise Arab friends, and some European countries that agreed with us, that we proceeded to recognize the state of Palestine without waiting for that final outcome. And in that sense it breaks with the method of Oslo, but it does not break with the goal of Oslo. And I think it's fair to be honest on both. I have at times thought about, is there a one-state solution, democratic for all, a one state for two people, but after everything has happened, I'm back to being very convinced that if this is not only the end of one of many wars in Gaza, but the end of the conflict, it has to be in line with the key goal that was set out already in Oslo. So no and yes.
Sigrid, you have been appointed to the Gaza Executive Board, and in our publication, to mention it again, we paid tribute to the Gaza peace plan, but of course first and foremost to the UN Security Council Resolution 2803 as really a window of opportunity. And the process is now in phase 2. So what, from your point of view, what does the Gaza Executive Board require in order to successfully implement the second phase?
That's a tough question. It first has to meet. Let's start there. Now I think importantly, I think we have to go back. The Gaza Board is grounded, as you said, in a Security Council resolution. That gives it legitimacy. It also gives it wings, because it also recalls, in a way, all other Security Council resolutions that speak to international law, humanitarian law, and ultimately the right of self-determination of the Palestinian people. Because we have to remember, statehood is a right, it's not a reward. It's not for terror, it's not a carrot to be handed out, it is a right. The question is how to achieve it as fast as one can. Because if there's any people that have been going through the same exam cycle to never be allowed to graduate, it is the Palestinians. Highly qualified, subjected to many rounds of conflict and occupation, but never graduating. And in the quagmire of the acts of terror of 7th of October, both peoples have faced a tremendous setback. On the Israeli side, the empathy button and the interest in even conceiving of a two-state solution, they never meet, only meet at the barrel of a gun or a checkpoint. And the Palestinians, to overcome the trauma of the subsequent military operations and the dire, hellish conditions their people in Gaza are subjected to. So then you come to phase 2. Phase 2 needs to be implemented, I would say, ra'san, immediately, without any further delay. The question is political will and the right political pressure. At the same time, I don't want 10% of the Gazans to have access to only shelter because they happen to live in the green zone. Phase 2 is withdrawal of the Israelis and demilitarization of Hamas. But aid and dignity in people's lives is not subject to any other party determining that. It's up to us to secure it and to make sure this is implemented at the same time. People cannot wait in line any days longer for their dignity to be restored by a small portion. And the last part, I agree with the spirit of Oslo. I was living in Jerusalem at the time, implementing these wonderful peace plans, and then Rabin got killed. And there is no modicum or substitute for political will, leadership, and the conviction to call out your friends, to act tough when tough love is needed, and to secure implementation. Because the collective failure we have seen in Gaza, in particular towards the most vulnerable, is a stain on the international institutions, on all of those, including myself, who speak international law and rights, if we can't deliver them. We have to move from words to action. And for me, that was a moral imperative, after all I've seen and been through, to join as an individual, no state, no country, no income, to be an advisor on the Gaza Executive Board. But the Palestinians have to be in the driving seat, not any one of us. We have to do that for the Israelis, for their security, and for the Palestinians to arrive, hopefully anytime soon, at a state that is worth living in. Because not any state, a state that is worth living in. Thank you.
I'm sure there will be a lot more questions, and I will open up to the public, but I will now go to a second round on Syria, and then we open up. Minister, we actually launched the Middle East Consultation Group on the very same day Assad was ousted, on the 8th of December 2024. It was a coincidence. A very happy coincidence, I have to say. And now let me share with you also again some of the findings of the survey data we're reflecting in our report, and they show that optimism among Syrian citizens remains remarkably high. According to the findings, 76% of respondents expressed support for the country's current policies. Of course, this is tempered by one of your most significant challenges, which is the deep-seated tensions among Syrians' sectarian and ethnic communities. So you just said in the previous town hall that you spoke actually to Marco Rubio here in Munich, and that General Maslum from the SDF joined you, if I understood that correctly. So I wonder if you could share a bit more on this.
Yes, because it's a complicated question, I will speak in Arabic. Yeah. So please take the headphone on. بالتأكيد أولا شكرا لكم على هذه الاستضافة، وأيضا شكرا للزملاء المشاركين، وأيضا نشكر السادة الحضور. الوضع في سوريا ربما يعني هو وضع مختلف وأسهل من القضية الفلسطينية.
From the Palestinian cause, the situation in Syria is a little bit easier than in we are on the ground much more easier than the Palestinian question. We have also our challenges, but and we are going through all the policies after the toppling of the previous leadership. We have put a program in order to be able to implement diversities. Also, we have put a law that is going to be implemented and covers all the categories and levels of the citizens in Syria, and also that is dividing the problems that are dividing the regime in Syria. We have been able to establish a platform for discussion in Syria, and we made the parliamentary elections, which was also the nightmare that the Syrians were the nightmare that the Syrians were suffering from was the sanctions, the economic sanctions. Now we are going forward, and we have witnessed several challenges that we cannot expect any upgrade or any development except when we face the challenges. We did not put our heads in the sand, but we faced the reality, and we met yesterday Foreign Minister Marco Rubio of Secretary of the United States, and we have many things of the identity of the Syrian national citizens. No one is going to dominate this except the Syrians. We are putting hand in hand in Syria, and from our responsibility we pave this way to establish institutions and to be one hand and to discuss every issue. In short, today we are also facing a new challenge, which is the reconstruction, and the Syrians should witness a leap on the ground and a development on the ground. Also, we are seeking development, and all the citizens and families needs health care, needs houses, needs education for their kids. So everything we are thinking of, and we're flexible to skip these differences to meet the point of views. We need all the citizens in Syria to share this with us. We have, of course, deep injuries inside us and inside the Syrian citizen. We also would pave the way. Anyone who wants to help Syria have to understand these points, because the Syrians are not thinking of luxury, but they are thinking to educate their kids and to develop the infrastructure and to educate their kids and to have their houses. Thank you.
Let me stay with the last point you made, the need for reconstruction, and let me turn to Ms. Faisal again, because Syria has announced a major investment package in support of Syria. In our publication, we also published some survey findings that indicate that trust in the new Syrian government remains low across parts of the Arab world. So if you had to advise the government, what more needs to happen in relationship to the neighboring countries?
I think not necessarily more, because they're already doing it, but continuous engagement, I think, is the key element, and that's what we've seen. Similar to what His Excellency talked about, their approach to minorities and ethnic groups in Syria. I think we've seen them reaching out to everyone, and including in the region, but well beyond. And that's, I think, what it takes. And obviously, it's a transitional period. Syria is coming out of a very difficult civil war. So some will be inclined to lean in, others will be inclined to watch and wait. I think that's fair. I think everybody has to make their own decisions. I think Syria's potential is mainly in its own people. So that's kind of the faith that I have. I think Syria is going to be built by the people of Syria. It's not going to be built by the regional countries, international countries. We all have a role to play, and obviously we contribute, and Syria needs investment from abroad and all of that. But what's going to attract those countries, and I can say, you mentioned that we have a significant investment package recently going in, that was entirely the private sector. Wasn't government initiated, wasn't government backed. It was based on real interest by Saudi business people who saw an opportunity to invest in the future of Syria. And I think that's going to be what builds Syria's potential, and that's the success that Syria can build for itself. So I am quite confident that as the government continues its progress, as an example, what you just talked about, and the resolution of the issue with the Kurds in a way that it was, I think, from my perspective, very reasonable and respectful of the rights of the Kurds. I think all of that will, over time, generate the necessary trust and faith, and part of that is also going to be obviously on the business sector, getting the regulation right, getting a friendly business environment, and having the necessary rule of law be really a driving factor of how things are done, making sure that corruption doesn't come into play. All of those things are things that we've heard the Syrian government commit to. So if they stay the course, if they do those things, and I'm confident they will, I think we're going to be actually surprised how successful an economy Syria can build in a relatively short term. They have a highly educated population. They have a huge potential in tourism. They have significant natural resources. So they have a lot of factors that are going for them. Obviously, security is going to have to be front and center, because capital is quite shy when it comes to issues of security. But as long as we maintain this momentum, I think we're going to see them being very successful in getting things done in a way that supports that trajectory positively.
I will ask Norway if you agree, because Norway, like the EU, like the US, has decided to lift sanctions early on. I was interested to hear there is particularly also the private sector that is engaging. So what more can be done to get the European private sector in?
So I actually agree with Prince Faisal also here, and I remember it's only 14 months or so now since Assad fell and the Al-Shara government came in, and I am also impressed. I went in after a month. I was an early visitor, and although it's been a bumpy ride and it's been difficult, I still have the sense that this is a government that actually means what it says and tries to do what it says it will do when it comes to unifying Syria for all people. And I would again say this distinction between being inclusive, which is a good thing, making everybody part of New Syria without being sectarian, is actually quite important, because there is enough of sectarianism in the region, and if that separation can be maintained, I think it's a good thing. Then it's basically building a new state. It's a country, but building a new state is always hard, it's always difficult, but I was very happy that the international community for once was able to move quickly on sanctions. Normally we take way too much time, so we don't give them even the benefit of the doubt. My argument in those discussions, both in Europe and with the US, is that these people haven't done anything wrong yet. They might do something wrong, then we can sanction them later, but they haven't done anything yet. And to inherit the sanctions from a regime that is gone is weird. And that argument actually held the day, right? So at least give them the chance to prosper economically, which is very important, because people can't eat flags, people eat food, and in the long run you need to show that there is real economic progress. So I'm on the side of optimism, but I'm also on the side of a steady, continued support in enabling this as a force for good. And remember that we have a Syrian government now that principally cares about Syria. Not that long ago, the leaders in Syria was very engaged in neighboring countries or allowed Russia to use it as a base for their Mediterranean and African operations. Now we have a government that focuses on Syria itself, as it should be, and I think that's something we should need to welcome. And if we get it right, we can be proud of having supported them. If we get it wrong, we might be partly to blame for not seeing this opportunity.
Sigrid, I wanted to ask you about civil society, because I'm a huge believer in the important role of civil society, not only for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but also in Syria when it comes to promoting political, social inclusion.
Yeah, well, I think I want to come back to a question. You started with trust, and I think in any post-conflict society, particularly also be it a civil war or be it a regional war fought by proxies or the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, trust is a commodity in high demand, but very low in availability. We see that across the board. Western politics, peaceful societies. In conflict and post-conflict settings, it is the most precious good, but also the last one to arrive and immediately to leave. And we need to focus on that. This is where I tie it not only to economic developments, give early dividends of change. Doesn't have to be peace with a capital P, but change, that hope is tangible, that yes, things will change, that there's an upward trajectory. That applies to Syria and the lifting of the sanctions. It will apply very much to Gaza and any other conflict setting. But the second part is civil society is an intrinsic, critical, central player in that regard. I think we tend to be myopic. Particularly, I've been a deputy prime minister too, so you look at state to state, government to government. We talk civil society, and in particular women-led organizations, but we don't walk the talk. Whereas civil society, local community actors come from the environment. They know what the issues are. They know that many local conflicts actually are either about land, or access, or water, or a very different issue that has trickled upward, but started very locally and small. So use civil society to refocus, give means to people, give dignity, and also have that political voice that they don't have to be elected in every parliamentary seat or in the Diwan or have access, but people feel represented, somewhere to go to with your grievances. So not the gun, but you settle it in a very different way. I think it's underestimated. It's a force for good. It is there long before the media and the international community have moved on, because it's their country, their society, their culture. And I think it's extremely important. And maybe one last branch, culture, theater, music, arts. Culture is the most underestimated, highest immaterial commodity we need to refocus on in that regard too. Private sector, yes, jobs, economy, security. Culture is part of the narrative of a people coming out of trauma. It is so neglected and yet so important.
I could not agree more, although as moderator I shouldn't give views, but I had to say that. But now I will open up the floor for questions. Please.
I'm Mustafa Barghouti from Palestine. Yes, nice to meet you again. My question is, while we talk still about two-state solution, this Israeli government is killing it. Yeah. And the new measures in the West Bank are not just another quantitative change, it's a very serious qualitative change. You said, Minister, that if a country does something wrong, it can be subjected to sanctions. What measures can the world do to Israel now, apart from condemnations that Israel doesn't care about? Will we see sanctions too?
I think that was to me. So thank you.
I'm afraid so.
No, but of course, Mr. Barghouti is again absolutely right. It is very, very important that we all see that although there is a glimmer of hope in Gaza, a glimmer of hope, because we might go into this second phase, and frankly the Trump administration seems to be quite adamant in driving that forward. What we're also seeing is that Israel is using the opportunity to continue to undermine governance and basically, you know, economic life in the West Bank, and that's extremely bad. We've condemned that over and over again, but you're totally right. That's not enough. And I think what has happened is that the international support for the two-state solution has become higher than ever. With the global coalition that the Kingdom and we and others installed, and the recognition, where actually the number of countries recognizing Palestine is almost as many as recognize Israel, just a few numbers apart. At the same time, you know, the material foundation in the West Bank in particular is also weaker than ever, so that's correct. But you know, but as Sigrid said, at the end of the day, it's about political will. These things can be changed. And it's not easy, and it's getting, in principle, it's possible to, you can take away settlements, you can have land swaps, you can maybe offer some of them to stay in New Palestine on accepted agreements and so on. There are ways around this, but of course this very extreme policy of you know, not only land grab and settler violence, but also actually trying to undermine the Palestinian state is extremely problematic, because the embryo of what is going to, what we recognize which as a state, but which of course is not a state in material terms right now, if we take away that embryonic institutional setup, there is no way going to fix Gaza either, because Gaza cannot be, I mean, yes, you can get humanitarian aid into Gaza, but you know, the political solution has to be built inside Palestine. So it's a real drama, and you're absolutely right, and I don't have all the answers, but I keep working on it.
Please, here, and then the lady in the second row.
Thank you. I'm Saif. I'm chairman of the Security Sector Reform in National Security Council of Iraq. Maali Wazir Kharijiyya, very nice meeting you. I would like to ask, you know, more than 5,000 Daesh detainees have been transferred from Syria to Baghdad. So how do you read this? How do you see this kind of support from Iraq to Syria? Thank you.
شكرا لك. بداية يعني موضوع نقل السجناء من سوريا للعراق كان ضمن عملية أمريكية.
The prisoners of Daesh in Syria is we support Iraq in any thing, and combating Daesh is a joint effort between Syria and Iraq, and we are monitoring this, and we are on continuous consultations and contacts with the Iraqi state on this issue. Thank you.
I think there was a lady in the second row. Yeah.
Thank you very much. This is Dalal Ariqat from Palestine. I'm a professor of diplomacy. Well, for the past 36 years, and since Oslo, we the Palestinian people had believed and advocated for diplomacy, negotiations, multilateralism. Unfortunately, my generation and my students now only witness more entrenched military occupation on the grounds, more settler terrorism, more confiscations of lands, extrajudicial killings, and detentions. And now, not de facto, but really on the ground annexation. My observation as a professor is that as long as Israel is enjoying impunity, I honestly don't think of any way that the war crimes of Israel can stop. So how can we move from this civilized, amazing rhetoric to actions on the ground, especially after being inspired maybe by the Belgian steps on the ground, bilaterally speaking. Now, as 160 states had recognized the state of Palestine, as a Palestinian, I expect those countries to bilaterally respect their legal before their moral obligations, not only in sanctions, but also in accountability, in justice, in dignity and freedom for all. Thank you.
Now, is the question for the Norwegian minister again?
The point of the root cause of the instability that we're witnessing, which is a missing terminology in nowadays conferences, which is the illegal Israeli military occupation.
Of course. Well, okay, I'm afraid it's well, first, excellent question. I actually fully share your critique of the international community. Just as a disclaimer, I am not the international community. I'm just a small part of it. But Norway has been very firm in not only saying these things, but actually we have used the UN, we used the International Court of Justice in order to establish legally what you and I knew all the time, namely that the occupation is illegal in all its aspects and that any attempt to annex is an even grosser violation of international law. That was established by a record, but a very clear ruling or decision in the Court of Justice and confirmed by a record number of states of the UN. We have supported the International Criminal Court. The International Criminal Court, which is independent, of course, has made the decision to indict Prime Minister Netanyahu and others. So if they go to any of our countries, and the 125 countries that are a member, they will be arrested and sent to The Hague. But they haven't gone. But then they don't go to these countries, and so it hasn't worked yet. But this is exactly to say that there should not be impunity. We use the legal instruments the world actually has. And it's also been imperative for me and my Prime Minister and the government to say that when we stand up very correctly, as we should, against the Russian illegal occupation of Ukraine, we also have to speak up about the illegalities that we're seeing in Gaza and the West Bank. And frankly, I would have liked to see more Western countries saying that earlier. They do now, but it took some time before they were able to be as clear. So we're doing our part, but the fundamental critique is of course correct, and I think that's also something. You know, this is a defining conflict for many people in the world. Most people are not Western, and many of them are watching your case, to see whether these rules are rules that apply to all people all the time in all circumstances, or just a menu from which we choose when it suits us. So it's really, and it's about Palestine, but it's about more than Palestine. It's how we treat people in these circumstances. So I'm trying to do my part, but we need more.
Sigrid, would you also want to comment?
No, I actually wanted to add to what Espen just said. It is particularly the inconsistency, lack of any coherence, being able, from a Western perspective, to deal with two conflict situations, different root causes, but law is law and international law is international law. The inability to act and pursue it in the same vigorous manner has undermined the very foundations and the credibility, particularly amongst young people, not only in the West, but also in the so-called Global South. And then you'll find it very funny when there's a reaction by Western countries to, let's say, the Peace Board, the resolution, or the broader board, that's not alive in many other countries, because they'll say, well, hang on a minute, that very same system that the West keeps now suddenly rushing to protect because they feel it's under attack, it never worked for me. Yep. So the foundation's perception is everything in politics, but coherence and alignment is even more important. And I think you're very right that unless we are called truth to power, whenever, regardless, you undermine the very foundations of a system you seek to protect and to project in a very uncertain era. So it's very important.
Please.
Yes.
My name is Jonathan Greenblatt. I'm from the U.S. I run an organization called ADL. I just want to ask on the issue of coherence. Like, the revisionism in this room is quite incredible. So I understand, and we believe in a two-state solution, have worked for a two-state solution, have worked for regional coexistence. And I really want to credit the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which has done so much on this front in recent years, especially under the Crown Prince. But to our European friends, you wanted a government for Palestinians by Palestinians so they can govern their own. I agree. You had that in Gaza on October the 6th. They had a culture like you talked about, madam. They had a working economy. They had all those attributes, all of those aspects. So I would just ask you, like, where were you? And they had cash flowing in, millions and millions of dollars to support the government there. What happened? How many universities were built? Since the only Israelis who were in Gaza at the time were the hostages being held in tunnels. The only ones. No soldiers, no occupation. So please tell us what you did as Europeans. It's easy to criticize. What did you do as Europeans to facilitate the healthy political economy, the culture, and the growth of an independent state in Gaza? What did you do? And where were you? Not on October the 8th, on October the 6th. Tell us about that, because the only coherence I hear is in the revisionism that everything is a function of Israel. It's not the case. Not the case at all.
I think, I'm sitting now, I was the UN Special Envoy dealing with the Israeli government mostly, working with them to implement Security Council Resolution 2720. Before the 6th of October, I was Deputy Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Minister of Finance. So before that, I went to Gaza. Like everyone else in Europe, we supported the two-state solution. European governments have always condemned Hamas, have always supported civil society, have worked with the Israeli government, my government in particular, and others, to further what we thought were peaceful ways. However, most European governments have always called out the closure of Gaza. We've always condemned Hamas. You cannot find a single European leader who hasn't. We've also spoken to an occupation. We've spoken always consistently to the right of a safe and secure Israel without any pre-qualification, and the need to end the occupation. And when I speak of culture, I mean music, I mean arts, I mean children thriving in schools. We mean a modern curriculum. We need freedom of movement. This is over and above. And when we talk consistency, it is on a global scale, that international law applies to everybody, regardless of nationality. States are beholden. Non-state actors, violent actors, of course, sadly, very often we can't expect them, we won't see them comply with international law. But states have to rise above it. This is where I think I can speak for all of us, stand our entire lifetime, and always working with anybody who furthers peace. But rights are for everybody. You cannot discriminate between rights, same as the safety and security of every individual needs to be sacred. Everyone that is a peaceful person.
We still have time for one. We still have time for one or two questions. The lady in the second row, please.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Yasmin Farouk. I'm the Gulf Project Director at the International Crisis Group. We were just talking in a session about how the different conflicts in the region are linked, and I think what happened since October 7th has shown and reminded us of this link. I wanted to hear your assessment about, one, do you see that link being established in the different policies towards the different conflicts that you are tackling, whether Gaza or Syria or Iran, and what's missing, if you will, and what are you doing to make sure that this link exists?
Maybe Prince Faisal?
Yeah, I mean, some of them are linked, some of them are not, and some of them are linked in different ways. It's, I think the main linkage is that instability breeds instability. Conflict breeds conflict. So, the ongoing conflict in Palestine destabilizes its neighbors. The conflict in Syria, when we had Iraq, when we had Daesh, that fed the conflict in Syria. So conflict breeds conflict. We now, if we look at in Africa, where we see the situation in Sudan, feeding into the conflict in Ethiopia, in the neighboring regions. So I think the main linkage, whether there are of course political through lines, and in many of these instances, some actors being present in all of them. But I think the reality is that conflict breeds conflict, and that's why we need to focus mainly and primarily on finding ways to live together and to address the core issues of conflict. We need to rise above some of the more narrow interests that drive us towards feeding those conflicts, and actually work together to build a better future. I think we have that opportunity. Syria is an example where we are now on a much better pathway. I think if Syria can continue, for instance, to set that example, that may then prove something that we can build upon. If we can have a similar outcome in Sudan, where we can find an end to that conflict, I think that can be also a huge driver of hope and optimism in the region, and so on and so forth. And of course, the most long-lasting of these conflicts that has driven a lot of the tensions and the turmoil in the region is the Israeli-Palestinian one. So if we can now, building on the 20-point plan that has been adopted in Gaza, build a better future for the people of Gaza, use that as a springboard to actually build a better future for the people of Palestine as a whole, bringing Gaza and the West Bank back together, and driving a level of not just coexistence among Palestinians and Israelis, but actually integration into the wider region, and focus all of our attentions on a better future, a future of hope, of prosperity, of diversity. I think that's the promise that exists under the surface of all this turmoil.
Time for one more question.
Can I just add one sentence?
Please, yes,
having
sure.
followed this from the interested outside, I mean, the level of agency from key Arab states, I mean, it was there, but it's there at a much higher level, and that's one thing that has changed. Not all Arabs agree, neither do Europeans, but there is much more coming together on taking a driver's seat role here, and I think that's what we saw. It's actually also what President Trump saw when he changed his positions on this, that there were some ideas that had been developed that are actually worth building on.
And if I add, in our publication, and this was part also of the reflections we had for over a year, there's also a chapter on the untapped potential of regional cooperation, also very much in line with what you have been saying. And of course, this needs regional leadership and ownership. I think we have, I know you will have to leave, but maybe time for one more question, very quick question. I think it was the lady in...
Yeah, hello. Well, thank you very much for the very interesting panel. My name is Hagar. I am from Israel. I'm a reporter for Haaretz. My question is for Prince Faisal. Does Saudi Arabia plan to provide funds for reconstruction in Gaza at this stage? And if so, on what terms?
We're still...
I have to go, sorry.
Thank you for that. So we're fully supportive of the peace plan and the Board of Peace. I think we need to see, first of all, a real end to the conflict. So that means that we need to have clarity on when Israel is going to withdraw, when Hamas is going to disarm, when everybody is going to comply with all of the 20 points in the 20-point plan. I think the US is working on that. There's a meeting on the 19th that will give us a lot more clarity. At that point, I think we will be able to have a better determination of where we can best contribute towards not just reconstruction, but also making sure that the people of Gaza, the people of Palestine, have a better future.
Thank you so much. This brings us to the end of this panel. A round of applause for an excellent panel.